Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion, it's not a straightforward review, it's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening. Hey, this is Lisa, and if you want to catch up with me on Twitter or X, you can find me at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on I Love That Movie on Instagram, at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. Show is always free, but if you want to support me on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. Right now, primarily just talking about Andor, as everyone seems to be these days. But anyway, if you do sign up for that, you get a weekly bonus episode of just things I'm watching throughout the week. Well, I want to turn my attention to my guest here. You'll hear a returning guest, a voice you've heard many times on the podcast. It's Tim. Say hi, Tim.
Hi, everybody. And much like the plugs that Lisa just said, if you want to follow me on social media, follow me on Threads and Bluesky. This is Tim Rooney or timrooney.bluesky. Bluesky, I don't know how you pronounce that. And my infrequent podcast, the Anything Goes podcast, where you can find wherever you get your podcast, which is a bunch of stuff in the works where like something like the little hint I will give, like talking about the Scream franchise again is in order, as well as a review of DC's Identity Crisis is on the board to be reviewed soon. And eventually, a retrospective on the Stranger Things show, season by season, is also in the works as well. But unsure if that's going to happen until after season 5 drops, whenever that happens, so we have a full context of the entire show. But yeah, that's what's going on my podcast, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Through the Lens Productions, my latest short film, The Laundry Room is up, and hints at my next big project for the year is coming soon.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Tim. If this is your first time listening to this show, you might be wondering how we select the movies. Well, my guest picks the movie, and I got a ping from Tim the other day, and he suggested this film. What movie did you choose to talk about today?
Yes, I chose to talk about Sweet Smell of Success, and I realized that it's like a running pattern for mid 20th century movies that I approach you with, like, hey,
I
don't know,
love
man.
it. I love that, Tim. Don't change.
Like, there's not many people like I could reach out to, like, hey, would you want to talk about this very talky movie that's in black and white and that has the very distinct mid-Atlantic accent all over the movie? Well, if you are, I have X, Y, and Z to talk about.
And this was my first time seeing this movie. When you suggested it, I quickly looked it up, saw that I could actually watch it on Pluto TV for free, which I enjoyed watching it. I will say it was frustrating to have the interruptions with the commercials. So that was they're terribly timed on those types of streaming services, but you can't argue with a free price tag. So I really enjoyed it. It's about an hour and a half runtime. And as Tim mentioned, this is a mid-century, I guess you could say, movie. Came out in 1957. I really enjoyed it. But when did you first see this movie?
It's so strange. Like, one, I think the one on Pluto TV is also in color.
No, it was in black and white.
Okay, because I saw, like, I did see the posting on Pluto TV, but then I saw it was like a color like thumbnail, and I'm like, oh, they have a colorized version of that? Weird. But for me, how I first became aware of it must have been, I might have come home from work one night and my dad had fallen asleep watching Turner Classic Movies and it like one bumper was ending and it was going into a introduction for Sweet Smell of Success. And I'm pretty sure it was Ben Mankiewicz. It wasn't Robert Osborne, and it was a Burt Lancaster marathon. That's what the program was for that week. And they're talking about this because Burt Lancaster was mostly known as, for the most part, as the protagonist, the hero of a movie. And like this in 7 Days of May, where like he gets to play a dark and menacing character. And it's curious because like it seems so, it makes so much sense on paper because he was a tall man. He was an intimidating presence, especially if you ask people who work with him. And hearing about it, I'm just like, okay, that sounds interesting. And then like from the jump and seeing Tony Curtis try to like weasel his way into high society and wanting getting his clients represented or noticed in the press. Okay, this is really cool. I got to go to bed. I will come back to this. Eventually followed it up on DVD, renting it from the library, and been kind of loving it ever since. And it's been one of those things where almost yearly I'll watch this because just the lyrical dialogue that's in this that is rich with subtext, but also just like it's so infectious that you want to use it in everyday conversation. But like how often you get to use lines like the cat's in the bag and the bag's in the river in everyday conversation. So yeah, that's where I first became aware of Sweet Smell of Success. And when I'm ever in a film noir kick, this one always ends up in the rotation.
Okay, well that's exciting. Thank you for sharing that. I think before we get too much further, I'm going to go ahead and read a quick synopsis of the film, and then we'll kind of jump into it. So, this movie, again, if you haven't heard this podcast before, please go watch the movie first and then come back and listen to it because we are going to spoil it. We're not going to hold back. But without further ado, here is the synopsis of the film. New York City newspaper writer J.J. Hunsaker holds considerable sway over public opinion with his Broadway column, but one thing he can't control is his younger sister Susan, who is in a relationship with an aspiring jazz guitarist Steve Dallas. Hunsaker strongly disapproves of the romance and recruits publicist Sidney Falco to find a way to split the couple, no matter how ruthless the method. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell, and we will dive in a little bit more. Usually at the top, I like to share a couple of quick facts. I have a feeling, Tim, that you come with the facts a lot. So if you want to chime in or have facts of your own, I'll just share a couple briefly. So Ernest Lehman's original novella was first published in Cosmopolitan magazine in 1950, whose editors refused to print a story with the word smell in the title. For this publication, the title was changed to Tell Me About It Tomorrow, although it reverted to Lehman's original title when published in book form. Lehman took some comfort from the fact that his original title was a term which entered the language. It's kind of funny to think about something just smelling like being, I don't know, uncouth or like not okay to publish. I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Like we can't dignify the word smell in print. What do
Yeah.
you think? We're not printing dirty magazines at this establishment.
Right. What a different world we're living in now. I also read that the character J.J. Hunsaker, am I saying his name right, by the way? I've only
I
seen
think
this
so. It's like
once.
Hunsaker.
Hunsaker? Okay. Autocorrect wants to change it to something else, but I'll keep it the way it is in the film. The character of J.J. Hunsaker is based on famed New York columnist Walter Winchell, who I know absolutely nothing about, but still found interesting that it was based on someone in real life. And then my last one is that one of the musical refrains that's repeated throughout the film was used nearly note for note in Boogie Nights, which is another movie I really like.
Yeah.
Darker
No idea.
film, but
Yeah.
But what about you? Did you have any quick facts you wanted to share?
Yeah, like based off like stuff that like that was cited in the Wikipedia page and everything, where like that it was a production that Burt Lancaster and one of his production companies, like along with United Artists, is what brought it to the screen, and it went through various writers who would want to adapt it, including famed screenwriter Patty Chayefsky, known for like Network and stuff like that,
Oh wow.
was supposed to be Lehman's replacement apparently when it was doing the pre-production process. But the director Alexander McKendrick, excuse me, brought on Clifford Oates as the playwright to do a rewrite of the movie, and it was curious because like thinking like, oh, it's going to be a couple weeks to do a new draft. Once Oates turns it in, and it took him to a couple months,
Oh wow.
unfortunately. But I think the time that was given, like that Oates was given to like do the rewrite of it, shows. Which, like I said, would be the very memorable dialogue and everything,
Yeah.
and the fact that it's not crude like the dialogue or anything like that, or it's not
Yeah.
not salacious in any way,
Mm-mm.
or even like boundary pushing. But it's like no, it's it crackles, it's sharp and everything, and even like lines of dialogue, like everybody knows Manny Davis except for maybe Mrs. Manny Davis, like things like that, that it just really resonate with an audience.
Yeah, I agree because the subject matter of the film could be considered, edgy, right? Because of
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that happen in the movie. But you're right, they do a really good job of having powerful dialogue without it being, I guess, over the top. You mentioned Clifford Odets. Yeah, the writers are credited as Clifford Odets, Ernest Lemon from the novella, and then also the director, Alexander McKendrick.
Yeah, and it's just curious, like where you wonder, like, all right, I wonder, and because you have multiple writers, but there are times when you see a movie where it has like 5 or 6 writers on a movie, like more
Hmm.
modern movies, and you have that sinking feeling in the movie, like, oh no, how much of a disaster is this going to be? Because when you see that many writers, it's usually something went wrong and a different team had to come and try to do patchwork.
Right.
But here, everything feels so seamless. Nothing seems out of place. It's never like one scene where like the tone of that seemed a little off for some reason, and it all seems like of a piece of each other. And but another thing that I found out when like doing research for this, like I imagine like, oh, because it's such a well-made picture, in my opinion, they're like, oh, this must have done gangbusters, but no, it lost money, and something
Oh,
I
interesting.
yeah, that like according to at least one source, it said like, let's see, according to Variety in 1958, that like probably lost $400,000 during its
Oh my
initial run.
gosh.
Yeah, but it's one of those movies where its reputation just grew and grew over the decades, and now is
Hmm.
considered like Sight and Sound, and it's put in as the top 250, Empire magazine in the top 500 greatest movies of all time, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, interesting. Now, as far as the director, kind of shifting gears a little bit with Alexander McKendrick, are you familiar with his work? Is this your favorite film of his, or have you seen other movies he's done?
This is the first one I saw of his, and I guess I would say it's my favorite. Like the other like big one I've seen was prior to this is called The Man in the White Suits
Okay.
with Alec Guinness, who is a chemist in England. He creates a new form of material for his suit that is like stain proof. So you can do
Oh,
whatever you
okay.
want and everything like that, and nothing will ruin it or a leave any blemishes on it. But it's a comedy of errors in order to get to that point, because like there are parts where like, all right, we gotta test the material as much as possible. Like, all right, we're gonna do this little bit of tension test. Okay, this seems to work, and then we cut to him putting up sandbags in his chemistry up, and he backs away, and it's an entire wall of chemistry of sandbags because he has TNT on the other side. He's like, all right, let's see if it survives this, and blows up his own office. And it's weird comedic stuff like that, and I'm just like, oh, okay, you kind of see absurdism in this, and you wonder like, all right, that doesn't seem like it would gel with something like a hard boiled noir movie, but it seemed to work. And one thing about Alexander McKendrick, like unlike a lot of filmmakers who are like, let me rephrase that. Unlike a lot of people who write books on filmmaking, he's actually a successful filmmaker. Like, even though he retired not so long after Sweet Smell of Success, he became a professor at Cal Arts.
Oh,
And during his
interesting.
time, he wrote this book on filmmaking. And it's one of my favorites because it's all about practicality of
Hmm.
it's not it's yeah, there is some theory, but it's not like, oh, we're going to lean heavy on theory and then any practical aspects or are kind of like, you don't really need that. No, there's a whole section in the back of the book like, oh no, how to approach staging in movies, like how you place the actors in terms of subtext of the scene and everything. And it's like, okay, that's really useful, and I'm very thankful that he went to that degree to impart his knowledge, not keep it all to himself.
Interesting. Well, this is the first movie of his I've seen, but so far I am a fan.
Mhm.
I thought it was really good. Um, what do you want to talk about next? Talked a little bit about the director, the writer. Is there anyone in the cast that you specifically? I know you already talked about Burt Lancaster, but did you want to talk about anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, Tony Curtis being such a, I guess, weasel would be the word I'd use or something
I
like
think
that.
that's a good word, and honestly, probably time period accurate. So I like that.
Yeah, the fact that like he's dodging his own clients because they're paying him to get the word out on their whatever their shtick is. Like, oh, I'm an actor or I'm a musician. Please get me in print.
Yeah.
And he can't like he can't even get himself booked by the police or something like that. Let alone get his client's name out there. And he's trying his damnedest to get JJ's approval and just knowledge acknowledgement by him. But I love in the very first scene where we see Tony Curtis as Sidney Falco sitting down with Hunsaker, and JJ lifts the cigarette to Sidney. He says, "Match me, Sidney," and Sidney won't. He's like, "No, I'm not going to demean myself in front of the people, the rest of the people at the table, including a senator here."
Hmm.
Only to be later on in the movie where JJ takes out a cigarette and Sidney immediately lights it without even being asked. Like, and you just see the progression of just the action of this character throughout the movie. It's like, oh no, you really, just because you're given a little bit of a light from JJ because you did some dirty work for him, you immediately like, oh no, yeah, yes, JJ, I will do anything for you. I'll even light your cigarettes for you. You know what? Like, I'm gonna hold the door open for you, and just the being a real sycophant is just like, oh, it's really fascinating to see.
Yeah. Can I read? I found a review from Roger Ebert.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned the person that Sidney Falco is meant to emulate, so wanted to just read a little excerpt from it. You can obviously find this at rogerebert.com, but it says, when The Sweet Smell of Success was released in 1957, it was a thinly veiled attack on Walter Winchell, who for decades had been the most famous and reviled gossip columnist in America. 40 years later, this was in 1997, Winchell is mostly forgotten, but the film lives on, sharp-edged, merciless. The performers by Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis have not dated or grown soft, although both men were dismissed as studio stars at the time. Can we think of a serious actor who could have played either role so well? Well, just wanted to bring it back to Walter Winchell since we mentioned him a little bit earlier, and to just kind of bolster your point around Tony Curtis's performance.
Mm-hmm. Which, like, I guess just how things change. Like, I'm looking at Winchell right now. Like, there was a pretty much like a playbill made up of like the and his nickname, the Bard of Broadway. Uh, that is an advertisement in the Film Daily from 1932, and he like much like how we talked about when I came in on to talk about Citizen Kane and Orson Welles and being Kane himself, Charles Foster Kane, being kind of a thinly veiled version of William Randolph Hearst. Winchell was carried by Hearst newspapers and chain
Mm,
syndication. So,
interesting.
yeah, I had no idea. This is just a weird connection that was unintentional, but I'm just like, oh, okay. And I imagine somebody who's never seen this movie before and who's not familiar with these movies at this time, like I imagine like a very successful podcaster could be in a very similar position like this. They could change the sway the opinions of a lot of people in the United States if they really wanted to.
This is gonna date me, but do you know what I was thinking when I
Mm.
was watching this movie? I was thinking of myself when I was younger, and I would follow a lot of like celebrity gossip, and I thought about Perez Hilton and just how hated he is now, and how I used to read that blog and I participated in some ways, jeering, laughing at what he posted, and I'm just so horrified now thinking about it. So I don't know. I really thought that was interesting about this movie. I mean, when we think about today, although the media still plays such a huge part in our lives, I think it's cool that in 1957 someone was, you know, commenting on it, like how bad this really is to like engineer fake stories about people and damage their reputation and ruin their lives, and how much of a slippery slope it is for the main character.
Yeah, I guess it's always been there in one form or another, one form of media or another, where is if a person has an audience, they have to be very careful and delicate how they use it for uh, morally good or morally evil ways or something like that. It's so easy one could fall from being a force of good to a force of evil, depending on their own personal picadillos. And yeah, like thinking about Perez Hilton, I have not heard the name in quite some time.
I
So,
know.
so I'm just like, oh god,
I mean,
he's
I'm sure
absolutely
someone at
right.
home is cringing that I'm like comparing him to this really famous columnist. I want to defend myself and say I realize it's different, but when thinking about pop culture now, it is something that came to mind.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, I guess like for the younglings out there, like imagine like content creators out there who are specifically out there like they're supposed to spill the tea, where it's mostly drama based content creators out there to like spread the whatever news, whether it be real or not, about certain influences. Like, oh no, did you hear what happened to this person in the Hollywood Hills this weekend? Oh, we have the tea for you, and all of a sudden, somebody's reputation is tarnished because of a popular person saying things about them.
Right. And I think Tony Curtis does a great job in this role. Obviously, we've talked about him before because we have an episode on Some Like It Hot. So go listen to that if you
Hmm.
need more Tony Curtis films. But yeah, I thought he did a great job at playing this character that I mean, I don't feel sorry for him, you know. And I think I feel about the same way as everyone else in the film does, but it's just done so well.
Yeah, and the fact that like he was a matinee idol, and how he was willing to be low status for most of the movie, only to find a backbone at the very end of the movie, even though that backbone is predicated on the fact that he had no other option out there, because like he had lost everybody because he tried to spin everything into
Yeah.
being his own trying to be successful. It ended up being his downfall.
Right. And I had read somewhere that Burt Lancaster, had the bigger paycheck and like is the bigger star, but obviously Tony Curtis is the one that gets more lines in the movie and is more front and center.
Absolutely, and it's Tony Curtis has got the showier role because he
Mhm.
gets more expressive and everything like that. But that's the power of Lancaster's role of Huntsacker. He doesn't have to be loud, boisterous, or really exclaim uh, too much, because he's like, no, 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 no. I will speak softly and clearly, and it will cause everybody to lean in and hang on every word, much like how probably everybody hangs on his word when it comes to his articles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. What about Susan Harrison, who plays Hunsecker's sister? I thought, wow, sometimes when you watch an older film, obviously I mean, obviously these are Hollywood attractive people, right? But I think sometimes when you watch an older movie, the actress kind of has that old star look. I don't know how else to say it, but I felt like Susan Harrison looked like a modern day beauty. I don't know how else to say that. She looked pretty under a modern lens to me. Like she looked like somebody just put her in that movie from 2025. I don't know.
Oh no, I totally get it because like I've you phrasing it like that, like oh yeah, I kind of like maybe it's just because Superman the new Superman's coming out, like oh no,
Yeah.
like she could play Rachel Brosnahan's Lois Lane
Yeah,
in the
she
upcoming
looked like
Superman.
somebody. Maybe that's what I'm thinking, but I can't put my finger on who she looks like, but I thought even though she has a small part in the movie, not a huge part, you see her in a few scenes, but I thought she was very convincing and really good.
Yeah, the whole movie kind of hinges on whatever relationship she has with the rest of the cast,
Hmm.
where like JJ is her older brother, but like has this very strange paternal protection over her
Yeah, it's
that's
very
very uncomfortable.
controlling and creepy. Yeah.
I mean, like, there's one point I realized that on this viewing where like we see the apartment that JJ and Susan have, and like
Hmm.
JJ's got like his desk in the middle of the room, and he's got this giant portrait of his sister on the table, and
So weird.
I enjoy, I love my siblings too. I don't have a giant picture of them or us together on my desk. That just seems a little strange.
Well, he kept saying in the movie that she was like his whole world and the only thing in his life, and I never really got like, did their parents die? I guess they just didn't really go into that too much. I guess it's
No,
not important, but
I,
just
I
important that she's front and center for him.
totally, and I think one thing that I think is different from her compared to everybody else in the movie. She doesn't need anything from him. She doesn't want anything for him. Everybody else wants something of
That's a good
JJ,
observation. Yeah.
and like, oh, like, hey JJ, can you give me what's the good word? What should I be paying attention to? But Susan's like, no, and she's got his number as well. That she knows like what his faults are and everything like that. She doesn't. I think she takes the course of the movie to realize how far he's willing to go for his own his own gains. I think that's what like
Hmm.
the it's finally revealed to her when she pretends to kill herself and gets Sydney to confess about what happened to Dallas, her fiance. That she
Right.
realizes, oh, these two men in my life are monsters in one way or another, and Dallas is probably in traction right now because of the run-in with the Kello, the detective.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I wonder, like, it's something that like I was watching it upon this viewing where
Hmm.
most of the movie takes like the first 45 minutes is almost in real time. That it has the energy for anybody who's either lived in New York City or visited New York City. But it's like, oh, it's midnight. Everything's got to be winding down. And then you walk on the street and you're like, oh, right. This is why it's called the city that never sleeps, where it is
Yeah.
bustling and there's so much energy that you feel like, oh, now I have my second or third wind. I'm ready to go for a couple more hours because everybody's out on the street going here or doing this. Like that scene where JJ and Sydney leave the club, and JJ's like remarking, "I love this dirty town." It seems like, oh, this place is vibrant and bustling, and that's why these two seem to thrive there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too.
But I just wonder, like, I'm just like curious, like how, like whether it be how Walter Mitchell and then JJ Hunsaker is able to like parlay an article into a TV show, and how like we I guess just talk about news of the day and gossip columns on the air.
Hmm.
I'm just curious like how that would work and everything. And I just
Yeah.
imagine because the media landscape is so much smaller that there was more eyes on things.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't have a lot of visibility into what that was like back then, but
Hmm.
it is interesting. Did you want to talk about any of your particular favorite scenes?
Yeah, I think like the I think it's like one of the scenes where you see like there's now I'm tripping over my words trying to get them out. Uh I think the scene that where you will see like, oh, if it's going to be cut into a montage anywhere, or it's like a moment they're going to highlight, it's the meeting of, it's the introduction to JJ to the audience where he's at dinner with the senator, the manager, and the young up and coming like ingenue,
Mm-hmm.
and then we hear about, oh, we think the manager is managing the talent, but he's actually carrying her around so she can be seen with the senator and no one raises an eyebrow.
Ah, yeah.
But everybody's like, everybody kind of knows what's going on. Like JJ says, like everybody knows who she's really here with, and if you want to run for president, you might want to be a little more discreet out in public.
Yeah.
And like how cinematographer James Wong Howe like kind of lit the scene where a lot of times Burt Lancaster with those glasses, like he's top lit, so there's heavy shadows underneath his eyes, and you can't really see the pupils. There's no eye light for him for most of the time, and so
Mm,
couple that with his all of his lines that are spent to cut people down, it really makes him a very of a I want to like say dangerous, like not in like physical sense for the most part, but it's like no, it seems kind of like a repulsive character you do not want to be around because his words are like poison. Like hell,
mm-hmm.
when he describes Sydney later on, he's like, I hate to take a bite out of you. You're a cookie full of arsenic and
Yeah.
things of that nature. Like, oh yeah, that's a scene that I absolutely love. And then the following scene when they're out on the street and Sydney's pleading with JJ, like, hey, I need your help with something like this. You need to help me with this. And JJ's like, my right hand hasn't seen my left hand in 30 years, meaning he keeps his more legitimate like things away from his like possibly legal stuff. And
Right.
the begging that Tony Curtis is willing to do in front of Lancaster in order to get him like, hey, I have clients. You're supposed to be helping me out. And he's like, I don't need to help anybody. If you want coverage, you better do something for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like organized crime almost.
Yeah, absolutely. But like the thing about it, like I realized upon this viewing, like we do not see a gun used whatsoever. A
Mm.
lot of the violence, like the beating of Dallas, happens off screen. It's only a few
Yeah.
slaps we see that JJ does to Sydney, and it's not like an overtly violent movie, but there is so much tension and threat of possible violence throughout the movie that it kind of leaves you just like like a raw nerve, like oh god, tension's over, and like sure the movie's only 96 minutes or something like that, but it feels like afterwards like whew, okay, I need to get up and walk around because I need to walk this tension off a little.
Yeah, it's intense. I mean, and like you say, there's no need for a gun because the words that they're using and the leverage and the I guess the corners that they can paint people into just abusing their power and their influences is pretty thought provoking because it does make you think when you read something, how true is it, right? Especially when it comes to gossip and things like that. And I think the characters in the movie can all recognize that a line's really being crossed. It's just kind of interesting how relevant that still is today.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing that you think there are times where you watch movies like I mentioned before, like Reefer Madness, where it's a sign of the times. It has no real relevance to what's going on today. It seemed really absurd that people took it seriously at the time. But then you have movies like this where, oh no, the messages of corruption and obsession are just as relevant then as they are today, which is a sad state of affairs. And another thing that it's almost like the verbal duels between Sydney and JJ like gets the lion's share of attention when it comes to this movie. But let's not forget that Sydney more or less pimps out his girlfriend to get a story, a smear campaign against Dallas at one point. And
I could not believe that. So that really is his girlfriend. Again,
yeah,
I'm asking the dumb questions because I've only seen this once. But yeah, that was crazy. I couldn't tell if that was like truly his girlfriend or just someone he was really close with, but that is messed up.
yeah, because like you can't tell if they were just good friends or like they've
Yeah.
hooked up in the past or it's a committed relationship because JJ's assistant also seems um concerned about him and the mess he's got himself in. So you could argue, or you can like infer, like, is there something else going on there?
True,
And
true. Yeah, good point. Maybe it's meant to be vague.
yeah, I could totally see that. And so,
I will say this, it was clear to me that the actress playing his we'll say girlfriend in air quotes um it was clear to me that she wanted to be with him and that she did things for him that he wanted, but then she realized that she's basically just a pawn for him in the end.
yeah, that she is just a means to an end for him, and it's really unfortunate because, like you said, it definitely seemed like there was some sincere emotions he had towards Sydney, and like possibly you could see a life with him, but uh,
It's so cringy, like um yeah, because she seems so incredibly hurt in that scene where she's like, this isn't who I am, this isn't what I do, and he just convinces her to do it, and she does it because of the help that it will bring her. But it's like just one more step in his descent into, not being able to come back from all the stuff that he does.
yeah, I kind of wish there was a follow up scene afterwards where, like, he sees her again and she like has no time for him, blows him off, or makes a big scene, and that's the start, the cracks of oh, Sydney is really being shown in public of for the kind of character that he is.
Yeah. I thought that was a good scene. I also really liked the scene with the guy that he's blackmailing or trying to blackmail, and then it doesn't work out. The guy that was with the cigarette girl.
Hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, and then like he does it in front of that one of JJ's competitors, like a fellow columnist. He does
Mm-hmm.
that in front of that columnist's wife, and she says like the only like decent thing you've done in years is that you've been truthful that you were having an affair on me,
Yeah.
and it backfires in Sydney. I think it would be, oh no, this guy will absolutely not want this information out, so he'll bend to my will, and it doesn't work for him.
Yeah, I guess he makes an assumption that because he'll cheat on his wife, then I think for a lot of the movie, Tony Curtis's character Sydney feels like, well, deep down, everybody's like this. I almost feel like that's his justification of like, well, this guy has skeletons in his closet and he's not perfect, so he's going to be able to be swayed by this. If I put pressure on him, he's going to give up. He's not going to want this to get out, as you said. But actually, the more pressure he puts on him, the more absurd it actually makes Sydney appear, because he slips him that little note. He starts dropping the hints around about the cigarette girl, and then it all kind of comes out. And I don't know if you felt this way, Tim, but I almost felt like his wife, I'm not going to say she knew 100%, but I think she knew. She was enjoying the champagne that he ordered. She was sending little verbal jabs to him. It was almost like she was just enjoying the life for what it was. And then he pulled that out in the open and thought that that was going to be such a big gotcha. But instead, it's just kind of distasteful to her, to her husband, to other people watching. They're all kind of like, really, dude, you went there. It doesn't have the effect that he's looking for at all, but it is a very intense scene. I found myself kind of on the edge of my seat seeing what would happen, and then, like you said, it all kind of just unfolds and it just makes him look pathetic.
Absolutely. It's so interesting that we're having a discussion like the love triangle of the columnist, the wife, and the cigarette girl, Rita,
Mm-hmm.
are arguably outside maybe also like Susan, like have like the most morals in the movie, where
Yeah.
like that the other columnist will like he comes clean that yeah I've been having an affair with this woman. The wife kind of is like I had my suspicions, but glad you were had enough gumption to admit it out in public and everything like that.
Yeah, it didn't really seem like they were in love. I mean, it was the
No,
50s and maybe they wouldn't be together. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I mean, I'm on his side, and obviously, not pro affair, but like, I do agree that this is a really big difference between his private life and the mistakes he makes, and then, compromising facts to the public. I do think that there's a difference, so yeah, I thought that was interesting.
yeah, absolutely, and the fact that like oh like well I didn't get them with this columnist, this other columnist who seems very lonely who needs a date.
Hmm.
I can probably get him to do this for him, and he does succeed in getting that smear campaign against Dallas. And I feel bad for Susie's fiance Dallas that he just wants to
Yeah.
like he just like I want to play music, I want to marry Susie. That's all he wants, and the machinations of a megalomaniac and his little stooge really mess everything up for him.
Yeah, because his sister was going to tell her brother about the relationship in the morning,
Hmm.
but Sydney swoops in, right, to like make sure that that doesn't happen and that he gets in trouble. And I thought it was really interesting towards the end when the brother and the sister are kind of squaring off and talking about it. She says something to the effect of, but I never got to say what I was going to say. Or maybe that was between her and Sydney. But I like that she brought that up of like, I never got to actually even talk about it. Like, you never went to me, you never talked to me about it, we never discussed it. And again, it's like almost like Sydney and then her brother, they're very manipulative behind the scenes. They'd never even heard her out. She had to do it this like roundabout way, and then it got ended before it even got started.
Yeah, and it's the scene where they have the kind of like I guess you say the blowout at the theater where
Mm-hmm.
they're doing rehearsals for JJ's like TV show, and I felt so bad that like JJ's like, oh no, Susie can speak her mind, right, Susie? Won't you
Yeah.
speak your mind? And like how she like gets so insular because her brother is towering over her in both literal and metaphorical way. And even Dallas, who's trying to stand up for her, is not helping matters, is making her feel even smaller. And I just feel bad for her that she can't speak her mind in that moment.
Yeah, I feel like it's because she knows what her brother is like capable of. Even he's not going around shooting people, but he is, I guess, he can ruin people, and she knows that. And so she's scared of him. Um and yeah, basically, when she even has a moment with Dallas where he's like, when are you going to tell your brother? And she's like, I'll do it tomorrow. And you can see even in that scene that she's very afraid of what's going to happen when she tells him. Well, it's so bad she doesn't even get to tell him. That's taken out of her hands, and we know what happens to Dallas throughout the movie. But I mean, yeah, she had every right to be afraid of him. She knew that it wasn't going to be good, and that he wasn't going to accept it.
No, not at all. But kudos on her that she's able to outmaneuver both JJ and Sydney in the end.
That's the best part of the movie almost. I mean, we can talk about it if you want, but it is the ending scene for me, I think, is probably my favorite part.
Yeah, that like Sydney is seems like he had been celebrating, thinking like, "Oh, I'm going to take over JJ's column when he goes off to Europe with Susan for a little while. So I'm going to paint the town red tonight." But gets a call. They say, "Oh, come to the apartment. I need to tell you something." Only to find out it's Susie there, seemingly like she's going to try and kill herself, only to make Sydney look guilty by having his hands on her when JJ walks in and make him look like that Sydney showed up drunk and was trying to take advantage of the situation and out both of them in their scheme to break up the engagement between Susie and Dallas.
Yes, that was such a good twist of fate because, throughout the movie we've seen Sydney engineer things. I mean, so much so that I think you mentioned this earlier, but like his secretary is like giving him that look and he's like, "Why are you looking at me like that?" He's having like one of those moments of like everyone in his life now thinks he's terrible. But he doesn't care because success is all that drives him. And so in the end, yeah, he goes to her apartment and she, we think she's going to try to kill herself. Although the only thing that kind of gave me a clue as to what was going to happen was I kept thinking, it's interesting that he's at her apartment and that she's like dressed for bed. Like I thought somehow that was going to come up later and I didn't know exactly how. But yeah, she has this fake attempt and then he's like wrestling with her and then her brother comes in. He's like, "What are you doing to my sister?" And she doesn't necessarily lie, but she omits the truth and he keeps begging her like, "Just tell the truth." And it's like, well, but you haven't been doing that this whole movie and you've been ruining people's lives this whole movie, so we do not feel sorry for you in this moment. And she does not say anything to exonerate him. And everything that she kind of teased earlier, because earlier in the scene she said something like, "Oh, well, when he finds out that I've killed myself, that you let this happen, he's gonna hate you." And suddenly Sydney is like trying to talk her out of it and trying to help, but she doesn't exactly do that. But she does effectively, ruin the relationship between him and her brother by making him think that, yeah, that he was going to assault her. So good revenge from her. She barely had to do anything, and she got him really good.
Yeah, it makes it like it really undercuts all the scheming and
Yeah,
backdoor politics that the two gentlemen were doing for most of the movie. That she's like, "No, I'm gonna show the world, like, or at least prove to myself that, oh no, you guys are full of crap, and I'm gonna do it with like such little effort in comparison to what you guys do for your plots and everything." And the fact that Susie manages to separate herself from her brother, and even though Sydney says like, "No, I'm gonna expose you," he does get a severe beating from
yeah,
the cop and everything. And so, but the music kind of indicates like, oh, everything is done, like justice has been served. Susie escapes, and Sydney gets, um, I guess, the justice he deserves. And JJ is probably going to be embarrassed if Sydney talks.
right. Oh, there was also, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but the part where Sydney planted the drugs on Dallas, that was a really tense scene too, because it really felt like in that moment Sydney, I mean, I think he really debated whether or not he was going to do that, right? Because they broke off the engagement, or yeah, they broke off their engagement. He was going to leave early, and I just feel like Sydney was really struggling with like, do I really want to continue this? But then he does it anyway, and it's like, ugh. Yeah, I mean, by the end of the movie, you do not feel sorry for him at all.
No, you really don't. And like the fact that like he planned the drugs, then he finds out the engagements broke off, when he could have walked away, not pointed him out for the cop, and everything would have been fine. But he sold his soul to the devil.
Yeah, and he hated that cop too.
Yeah. And
because the cop was crooked. It's interesting. He's able to recognize when people are bad and that he doesn't like them. But yeah, he ends up working with them because who else are you going to work with to do something corrupt than a corrupt individual?
absolutely, yeah, it's like it is like it does feel like the pot calling the kettle black, where it's like, no, you're a corrupt individual, and you're like, really? So I
Yeah.
mean, like, you might want to look in the mirror once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for a lot of the movie, he's able to kind of convince himself that, that there's a good side to him, that this is just like that little bit he has to do to get success. But I mean, the stakes keep getting raised right throughout the film, and I think by the end of it, he's desperate, and it's all turned on him, which is easy to do. I mean, he's been turning things on people the whole movie, so now he's just a victim of his own behavior, and yeah, it's really good.
It really is, and like the best movies of the time, they were in and out, and you're like, okay, it seems like, oh, this is why they were perfect to be part on a double bill with
Mm-hmm.
uh another B picture.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was interesting when I was kind of reading that Roger Ebert article earlier that he said they were kind of like studio stars at the time, and it is interesting how it's almost like sometimes that level of fame makes you not recognize or not think about just how good those actors are. But obviously, as you said, this movie, while it did make a lot of money when it was released, over time, I think people have come to really respect it.
Yeah, because like you imagine, I guess like somebody who would be up and coming like James Dean at the
Mm-hmm.
time, or maybe like Glenn Ford, or other matinee idols where they're like, oh no, those folks have street credibility. If I
Mm-hmm.
was gonna say something like that, like, oh no, they're not like just like golden age. Like somebody like compared to somebody like Jimmy Stewart, like, oh, Jimmy Stewart is a product of the studio system. Somebody
Yeah.
you don't think like have a certain kind of grit or authenticity, but then you watch movies of his, especially after World War II, where he came back a changed man. You can tell like movies Jimmy Stewart did before World War II and afterwards.
Yeah.
But I think it's because of Tony Curtis's and Burt Lancaster's positions they were able to get something like this made. But like you said, unfortunately, he didn't make money at the time. But like, it's the rare time in the studio system where, oh no, all these things lined up, it found its audience, and it's rejoiced by the fans who really love it. Like, I guess a more recent example of that is like The Nice Guys with Russell Crowe
Oh yeah, I love that
and
movie.
yeah, and Ryan Gosling, where like all the right things were there. It was Shane Black's like blank check movie. They made it exactly how they wanted. It didn't make a profit, but it has its dedicated fan base and people are
Look,
screaming for
yeah,
a sequel.
I'm one of them.
Yes.
Totally agree. And yeah, I think yeah, this movie is really good, and it's unfortunate that it wasn't big when it came out, but that happens. I always think that when a movie comes out and people go, "Oh, this didn't make any money. What a horrible disaster." Da 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 da. Da. I'm like, but sometimes things come back. Sometimes things do get a second life, and I'm glad that this did because it's a very interesting film.
It, absolutely. And a movie's impact should not be judged solely on the weekend box office.
Agreed. And I feel like we're in an era of like I think we over focus on that.
Right. I mean, because the fact that like Hollywood is so worried about because they spend so much money on movies that they need to make as much profit as possible. So they bank real hard on the opening weekend or the opening two or the first 2 weeks of a movie
Yeah.
and don't realize, oh no, unless you delete the movie from your cloud for tax purposes, like a movie will live on and endure, and God willing, you'll find an audience if it doesn't find it initially.
Yeah. Yeah. What else did you want to talk about in regards to this film that we haven't touched on already?
Just like I would say, the cinematography is beautiful. The black and white photography for this is wonderful, and it's something that I'm just like James Wong Howe's like photography at this time is just it was gorgeous, and I'm so happy I got the Blu-ray from Criterion Collection because it's a beautiful transfer, and it's like one of those things I just want to like I could like every frame of painting because like the shadows,
Yeah.
the light, the position of both the characters and camera is perfect throughout the entire movie. It's not a moment where it's like, oh, that's an awkward cut to a close up trying to because you want to get out of a scene quicker or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I love this genre that you of this movie. So I'm a sucker for any noir film. I agree that it's beautiful to look at. And I think the casting is really interesting, and I know that the studio, I think, didn't necessarily want Tony Curtis to play who he played, but he was tired of doing pretty boy roles and he wanted to do something different and something darker, and I think, as we talked about earlier, sometimes that makes it even more effective, right? When somebody's kind of who gets typecast gets to do something different. So really like that about it. I liked the music. Um, yeah, I don't know. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought it had something really interesting to say about the way that about I guess the darker side, I guess, of journalism that I think is compelling and interesting. So liked it all the way around.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like Elmer Bernstein's score is amazing. I mean, all the technicians for this were great, and it's just like, oh no, I can just keep watching this and finding more amazing things in here, and we can go minute by minute for this movie, but I'm like, no, I say like we'll be conscious of everybody's time right here, and to say
Yeah.
now like movie's great. If you've not seen it, spoilers, and I think you owe it to yourself to go out and seek this movie out.
Yeah, it's got an hour and a half runtime too, so not a super long film. So if you have an afternoon to kind of take a stab at it, I guess I'll ask you my couple of quick questions, which we kind of maybe already answered a little bit here. But Tim, if you had to pick like one thing or sum up what it is you love about this movie, what would that be?
That corruption in the media is not a new concept. It's been around for a long time, and here's an example of that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. How how would you pitch this movie? Which is kind of a similar question, but how do you pitch this to someone that hasn't seen it before?
How would I pitch this? I would pitch this movie as, would you like to see a movie about a person selling their soul to the devil, but in order for fame and fortune, or it has to break up a lovely couple in order to do that?
Yeah, I think the what you talked about earlier about media, and I think is a big selling point of the film. But I know I say this a lot. I feel like sometimes guilty saying this because I think I overuse this logic, but I think it's true. I think that this is a good segue, maybe a good introduction into, some people avoid older movies because they feel like they're really dated or maybe don't speak to today. But I feel like this one does, and I think the best ones do. Right? They're timeless in that way. So I would give this one a shot. As I said before, you could watch it on Pluto TV. But I think it's very enjoyable, and I'm glad that you picked it, and then we got to talk about it today.
So am I. I'm so glad you A, made the time to do this discussion, and B, um, sat down to watch this, because I'm very glad that you were able to make time for this. And knowing you're a fan of this kind of genre, now you have another movie to like, oh,
Yes.
I'm like, oh, I'm in the mood to watch a film noir. What should I watch? Now you have another contender to pass the time.
Yeah, you probably sensed me processing in real time in this episode because I feel like I need to see it again. Sometimes it's easier in episodes when I've seen the movie like 10 times. I have so much to say, right?
Mhm.
But it's also kind of exciting to talk about a movie that I haven't seen a lot because I'm mulling it over, I'm thinking about it. But yeah, I guess my biggest pitch would be I'm going to watch it again, and I recommend that you watch it if you're listening.
That's the best pitch anybody can have on a movie.
Exactly, exactly. So, Tim, before you leave, is there anything you want to plug?
Again, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/slash Through the Lens Productions. My latest short film, The Laundry Room, is up there. I'm dropping a teaser on a project that'll be coming later on this year. That'll be coming out this Friday. So subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode, never miss anything that I put up there. As and episodes is more your speed. The Anything Goes podcast, which is, I know, very infrequent, but um, there's stuff in the pipe for that I think people will not want to miss if they enjoyed listening to me ramble on for this past hour.
If you're listening to a podcast, it's kind of a given that you enjoy rambling. So I think you're in good company. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast, Tim. Really enjoyed having you. Hope to have you back soon.
Yes, absolutely. Whenever you have an open spot, I'm more than willing to find a movie for us to talk about.
Perfect.